Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, May 15, 2024. Democratic President Joe Biden and Republican former President Donald Trump agreed to two presidential campaign debates, the first in June on CNN, the second in September on ABC News. House Speaker Mike Johnson defends his trip this week to New York City to attend and support Donald Trump during his hush money trial, while House Democrats criticize the move. For National Police Week, the House debates and votes on a bill to require undocumented migrants who assault law enforcement officers to be detained and deported. And President Biden pays tribute to fallen officers at the National Peace Officers Memorial Service on Capitol Hill. FDIC Chair Martin Gruenberg apologizes at a House hearing after a report shows widespread sexual harassment and racial discrimination at his agency, but he still faces calls to resign. NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady tells a House committee that the cargo ship that slammed into Baltimore's Key Bridge, causing it to collapse, suffered 4 power losses in 2 days leading up to the accident. President Biden tells Congress he'll approve $1 billion in weapons sales to Israel, just as the Republican-led House plans to vote on a bill to prevent a repeat of the president's recent pause in one arms shipment to Israel. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken continues his visit to Ukraine, announcing another $2 billion in U.S. military aid. From the New York Times, President Biden and Donald J. Trump have agreed to 2 debates on June 27th on CNN and September 10th on ABC News, the first onstage clashes between the former president and his successor in more than 3 years. While some of the details were still being hammered out, the agreement to the 2 debates reached in a series of social media posts Wednesday morning raises the likelihood of the earliest general election debate in modern history and immediately delivered a jolt of electricity to a campaign that had settled into something of a rut. Mr. Biden opened the exchange on Wednesday by saying he was willing to debate Mr. Trump twice before the election and as early as June, but on the condition that the arrangements bypassed the nonpartisan organization that has managed presidential debates since 1988. That was from the New York Times. President Biden posted a short video on X early morning.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
President Biden posting that video on X. The reference to Wednesday is when the hush money trial in New York City is not in session, according to the judge. Donald Trump responded on Truth Social that he accepts and was, quote, ready to rumble. He then went on the Hugh Hewitt radio show.
Now, let me talk to you about the debate challenge. President Biden just issued you a debate challenge for June and September with the Veeps talking in July. Do you accept?
Oh, absolutely. I've been trying to get, he's issuing it. I wonder whether or not he shows up because, he also challenged me to golf. So I'm a very good golfer. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He said, I'll give him 3 aside. But he knows he'll never play. This is sort of like that, I think. But I hope not, because I really think he has to debate. He might as well get it over with. Probably should do it early so that he can, he's not going to get any better.
No, but June and September is great.
It's a down factor for him.
June and September would be great if you can agree on the size of the table and the moderators.
Well, why don't you look at the statement? I just put out a statement. You should have it on your hot wires. You get everything. I notice you get things very quickly. I put it out on Truth, and Truth is the hottest thing right now by far.
I will go look that up. Let me move on.
Former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential candidate this year on the Hugh Hewitt radio program. The back and forth with President Joe Biden resulted in the agreement of 2 debates between the major presidential candidates. First, June 27th on CNN, and then President Biden posting have also received and accepted an invitation to a debate hosted by ABC on Tuesday, September 10th. Trump says he'll arrange his own transportation. I'll bring my plane too. I plan on keeping it for another 4 years. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre often says at her news conferences when asked about campaign matters that federal law prohibits her, it's known as the Hatch Act, as a public employee from talking about it. That happened again today, but Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy did try with a couple of questions.
Should we see this sudden offer from the president to debate as a signal that you guys realize you need to change the subject after some really bad polling?
We had a back and forth on polling yesterday, and it just goes back to the core of what I said to you, which is, look, this is a president that has had a pretty successful especially legislative tenure in the first 3.5 years, and has delivered on many things that are popular to the American people. And we're going to continue to talk about it. We're going to continue to travel the country and talk about investing for America. We're going to continue to talk about how we need to do more to lower costs for Americans. We get it. We understand how hard it is, as the president talks about being around the kitchen table, and how hard it is to make those difficult decisions sometimes every month on what you're going to pay for. So he gets that.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre during her news conference. More from the New York Times article, the public back and forth over debates started on Wednesday morning after Mr. Biden's campaign chair, Jennifer O'Malley Dillon, sent a letter to the Commission on Presidential Debates. The letter notified the group that Mr. Biden will not be participating in the 3 general election debates sponsored by the Commission, which are scheduled for September 16th, October 1st, and October 9th. It was a striking decision for Mr. Biden, an institutionalist who has tried to preserve the traditions of Washington. Instead, Ms. O'Malley Dillon writes in the letter that Mr. Biden will participate in debates hosted by news organizations. That was from the New York Times. And from CNN, the first debate will be held in the network's Atlanta studios with no audience present. And an anomaly in debates between presidential candidates. The format is in line with the proposal from the Biden campaign to the commission in its letter, which Donald Trump pushed back on in his Truth Social post, saying he would prefer, quote, for excitement purposes, a very large venue, although Biden is supposedly afraid of crowds. That was the quote from Donald Trump. And CNN posting later, CNN anchors Jake Tapper and Dana Bash will moderate CNN's presidential debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump on June 27th from Atlanta, Georgia. This is Washington Today. Story from Politico, a large House GOP group is discussing a trip to New York to back up Donald Trump at his hush money trial, according to 4 Republicans familiar with the matter, joining a growing GOP trend. Those lawmakers considering a Thursday visit, which is not yet finalized, include a chunk of the House Freedom Caucus. 2 of those people told Politico, granted anonymity to discuss fluid discussions. Members of that conservative group are being particularly tight-lipped in case a busy House schedule this week delays their plans. That was from Politico. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, attended the Donald Trump trial yesterday and today at a news conference in Washington explained why.
Many in the press have asked, why did you go there? Because I'm a former litigator. I'm an attorney. This is an egregious violation, a travesty of justice. They are using the judicial system for political purposes. And this is something the framers warned us against. In a constitutional republic, look, everybody, remember, I remind us all the time here, we're still an experiment on the world stage. There has never been a system of government like ours. We started something new in 1776, a constitutional republic. We removed the monarch, and we said it's going to be a government of, by, and for the people. You know what's critical to maintain, to keep a republic, is that you have to have the people, we're self-governing, the people have to believe that we have equal justice under law. There's a reason that Lady Justice is depicted with a blindfold. There cannot be 2 tiers of justice. There can't be 2 systems. You can't exact political revenge on one political figure using the justice system and then give a pass to the other. That's what the American people see. And it doesn't matter how they try to spin it or make it into something that it is not. We see what is happening. The soon-to-be official nominee of the Republican Party is tied up in court in Manhattan and cannot be on the campaign trail throughout the week. This is the 5th week that he's been tied up on what is not even easily defined as a crime that he had nothing to do with. The DOJ officials, prosecutors looked at all these charges 8 years ago. They did not bring charges because there was nothing there. Now they've done it suddenly. Why? Because Donald Trump is running for president again.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference today in Washington. Congressman James McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, brought up the Speaker's trip to New York for the hush money trial today during debate on the House floor on a resolution that would set rules for debate on other bills this week, some of which deal with law enforcement, as this is National Police Week. Here's Congressman McGovern.
Look at the cover of today's New York Times, Mr. Speaker. This is unbelievable. Here's a picture of the Speaker of this House of Representatives, second in line to the presidency, standing in front of a courthouse, acting as a prop for Donald Trump trying to interfere with a criminal trial because apparently Republicans like law and order unless it applies to them. Unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. And this stunt, I'll say to my colleagues, this stunt of the Speaker and members of the Republican members of Congress going to this courthouse, this stunt diminishes this House of Representatives. Their candidate for president has been indicted more times than he's been elected.
The chair would remind to refrain from engaging in personalities towards presumptive nominees for the office of president.
I didn't think I was. And somehow, Madam Speaker, they have the nerve to tell us about the criminal justice system. Give me a break. Their credibility on this issue has evaporated. It is pathetic.
Congressman James McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, today on the House floor during debate on the rules for debate for other bills, some of which deal with law enforcement matters, scheduled this week. One of the bills did come up today. It is titled Detain and Deport Illegal Aliens Who Assault Cops Act. The sponsor, Jeff Van Drew, Republican from New Jersey.
My bill, the Detain and Deport Illegal Aliens Who Assault Cops Act, sends a simple but clear message. If an illegal alien assaults our law enforcement officers, they will be detained and they will be deported. This is because these actions must have consequences. Now that seems like a pretty common sense life lesson that most of us learn at a very early age. But it is a lesson, unfortunately, that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas apparently never have learned. In less than 3.5 years, President Biden has released nearly 4.9 million illegal aliens into the United States. That doesn't include the gotaways. That doesn't include a whole lot. And in most cases, we don't even know who these people are. We don't even know where they're going. We don't even know their intentions once they are here, Mr. Chair. The Biden administration's policies are reckless. Those policies are dangerous. And these policies have very real life consequences, particularly for American law enforcement. Here's just a couple of examples. In March 2023, an illegal alien violently assaulted a U.S. Border Patrol agent as the agent attempted to take the alien into custody, injuring the agent's face and his arms. In November 2022, the FBI arrested 2 illegal aliens for pushing, dragging, and punching a U.S. Border Patrol agent. Now, the chaos at the southwest border is spreading into communities, towns, and cities throughout the United States of America, and there is no end in sight. Take this example just this past January, just one example. According to the New York Post, quote, as many as 14 migrants were believed to have been involved in a brutal beatdown, end quote, of 2 NYPD officers in Times Square. To make matters worse, because of New York's far-left, extreme, soft-on-crime policies, many of the attackers were freed without bail. Everybody heard me right, freed without bail, and given reduced sentences through very weak plea deals.
Congressman Jeff Van Drew, Republican from New Jersey, on the House floor. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington State, opposed this bill.
When this bill was introduced, it was clearly in response to an incident earlier this year in which some recently arrived migrants allegedly assaulted a group of law enforcement officers in Times Square. That incident sparked outrage across the country. But our Republican colleagues directed much of their ire on one particular individual who flipped off TV cameras as he left his arraignment. The image was plastered all over Fox News and was promoted by former President Trump as a symbol of everything that's wrong with the Biden administration's approach to immigration. There was only one problem, Mr. Chairman. As it turns out, That specific individual, who everyone was so quick to demonize and attack, had the charges dropped against him. Despite being arrested and initially charged, he was not even present when this crime occurred. We also see this in protests, where one person gets unruly and the police arrest everyone in the crowd. Let's be clear, violence is never the answer and should never be used in a political protest. It was wrong for people to assault the police right here in the United States Capitol on January 6th, just as it is wrong for people to assault the police or anyone else during any protest, regardless of their politics. That is why U.S. law already makes assault a crime. And admitting to or being convicted of a serious assault on a law enforcement officer already results in immigration consequences under current law, including mandatory detention and deportation. This bill doesn't change that, doesn't make anybody safer, doesn't fix any problems in the immigration system. Instead, this legislation deems everyone guilty until proven innocent. It serves only to further the Republican agenda to fearmonger about immigrants and keep immigration in the news during an election year, while at the same time bankrolling the private for-profit prison companies.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington State, on the House floor. Today is National Peace Officers Memorial Day. It was first established by the late President John F. Kennedy. President Joe Biden spoke today at a service in front of the U.S. Capitol, hosted by the National Fraternal Order of Police, to honor police officers who have died in the line of duty.
Throughout my career, I've unfortunately spoken at too many funerals of too many police officers, extraordinary, brave, heroic public servants who kept us safe. Being a police officer is not just what you do, it's who you are. You're just like all the women and men in law enforcement I grew up with in Scranton and Claremont, Delaware. You always run toward danger as others run away from it. Most of you, when you were kids, you did it, long before you became an officer. You run toward the cries for help, knowing that you could be of help. It's part of your DNA to serve, to protect, to defend. You represent the very best of America. You're the steel spine of this country. Back in February, I convened a group of police chiefs at the White House to talk about the hard work you're doing to make our communities safer. Being a cop is one hell of a lot harder than it's ever been. We expect everything of you. We expect everyone. Drug counselors, you're supposed to be, protecting people who are overdosing. Social workers, the kids who have been abandoned. Guardians, communities flooded with weapons of fear. That's why since day one of my presidency, I've been working to make sure you have the tools you need to protect, the partners you need in the community to help.
President Biden on Capitol Hill at the National Peace Officers Memorial Service held on the west front of the Capitol building. Story from Reuters: 60 officers were killed in the line of duty in 2023, one fewer than the previous year, according to FBI data. The 3-year period ending in 2023 had the highest total number of law enforcement deaths, 193, out of any such 3-year period in the past 20 years, the data shows. You're listening to Washington Today. From Politico, FDIC Chair Martin Gruenberg faced a bipartisan grilling on Capitol Hill Wednesday over a blistering report that found pervasive harassment and mistreatment of employees at the agency on his watch. Democrats openly questioned whether Gruenberg should stay at the agency, but they stopped short of joining Republicans in calling for his removal, which would imperil a crackdown on big banks and halt other pending financial regulations opposed by the industry. Gromberg appeared before lawmakers for the first time since the independent report last week portrayed a workplace culture that for years was rife with sexual misconduct, discrimination, and other mistreatment of employees that managers did little to stop. The investigation also found bad behavior by Gromberg himself, detailing incidents as recently as May 2023 in which he lost his temper and berated staff in a, quote, demeaning and inappropriate manner. That was the story from Politico. Chair Gromberg testified before the House Financial Services Committee. In his opening statement, he apologized and promised reforms.
The review found that for an extended period of time, the FDIC has failed to provide a workplace safe from sexual harassment, discrimination, and other personal misconduct. I accept the findings of the report, and as chairman, I take full responsibility. To anyone who has experienced sexual harassment, discrimination, or other misconduct at the FDIC, I again personally want to apologize and express how deeply sorry I am. I also acknowledge my own failures as chairman, both in failing to recognize how my temperament in meetings impacted others, and for not having identified the deeper cultural issues at the FDIC sooner. I am personally committed to addressing these issues. We accept all of the recommendations of the report and are incorporating them into our existing action plan for a safe, fair, and inclusive work environment.
Martin Gruenberg chairs the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, testifying before the U.S. House Financial Services Committee. During the hearing, Congresswoman Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri, questioned him about how things could have gotten so bad.
In this report, 500, north of 500 employees came forward with complaints of sexual harassment, discrimination, and other workplace misconduct. This is a massive number, and it's only scratching the surface. For context, you have over 5,000 employees at the FDIC today. I have a quick answer to these questions, sir. Chairman Gruenberg, how often do you get out of D.C. and visit FDIC regional and field offices?
I try to visit we have 6 regional offices around the country, Congresswoman. I try to visit each regional office at least once a year.
One time a year. And the field offices?
Generally not field. We have 70 field.
So you don't go to the 70 field offices once a year to go to the 6 regionals. All right. Do you meet with the employees, rank and file employees, when you have those once a year visits?
Yes, I do.
Did it ever once occur to you that something highly inappropriate was going on at these offices?
The kind of deep-seated workplace culture did not come through in those visits.
You gotta be kidding me.
No.
Why? How could you not know? You've been there on the board 19 years, and you are telling me that you've never heard a single story of harassment? And sir, I remind you, you are under oath.
Yes, no, Congresswoman, I understand the question and why you ask it. In those visits, I met with employees, rank and file employees. It simply did not come forward.
Huh. Well, this report has some of the most horrific HR abuses that I have ever read in my life. We can talk all day about your personal management problems, and that I find appalling also, but what's more concerning is the complete ignorance and of the well-being of the employees that you're entrusted with leading, and the fact that you don't even visit or talk to them once a year to 6 regional offices, never to one of the 70 field offices. Your employees have lost confidence in you, sir. I have lost confidence in you, and Congress has lost confidence in you. You, sir, should be fired. Not resign, fired.
Congresswoman Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri, questioning FDIC Chair Martin Gruenberg at today's House Financial Services Committee hearing. A hearing that is part of the regular oversight by the Committee of Financial Regulators, and the other witnesses there were the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision. You can find the full video of the hearing at our video library, cspan.org, and those 3 will be before the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee on Thursday. We'll have live coverage on C-SPAN Radio beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hi, it's Kayla from C-SPAN. Imagine 45 years ago when there was just a handful of television networks. C-SPAN first went on the air bringing an unfiltered view of government directly to America's living rooms. No spin, no commentary, just pure democracy in action.
And it's Greta from C-SPAN. It was a bold experiment. We finally had a front row seat to Congress, the White House, and the campaign trail, all without government funding.
As we celebrate 45 years and a legacy of unfiltered access, we ask for your support of a donation in honor of our 4 decades of service. Your gift, no matter how big or small, will help maintain this vital resource for access to the democratic process.
You can help ensure another 45 years of witnessing history unfold and empowering citizens to be informed and engaged in the political process. Visit cspan.org/donate today and join our 45th anniversary campaign.
Thank you for supporting C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of government. Visit cspan.org/donate today to make your gift of support. Thank you.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app that is a free app. The chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, Jennifer Homendy, testified today before a House committee about the collapse of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge back in March. It collapsed after a cargo ship crashed into it. 6 construction workers were killed, and shipping routes have been affected. Chair Homendy summarized the agency's preliminary report about what caused the ship to go out of control.
Yesterday, we released our preliminary report, which shows that the Dolly experienced 4 total power outages. Preliminary information indicates that the March 25th blackouts were mechanically distinct from those that occurred on March 26th. 2 were related to routine maintenance in port. 2 were unexpected tripping of circuit breakers on the accident voyage. On the 25th, a blackout occurred when a crew member mistakenly closed an engine damper while he was working on the exhaust system in port. This effectively blocked the engine's exhaust gases from traveling out of the vessel's stack, causing the engine to stall. Vessel power was briefly restored, but insufficient fuel pressure to the online generator caused its speed to decrease. Its breaker opened, and a second blackout occurred. While recovering from this second blackout, the crew switched to a different transformer and set of breakers from those that had been in use for several months. Switching breakers is not unusual, but may have affected operations the very next day on the accident voyage. So the configuration of the breakers remains under investigation. On the 26th, when the ship was about 0.6 miles from the bridge, 1 high voltage and 1 low voltage breaker that were powering most of the vessel's equipment and lighting unexpectedly tripped. As a result, the vessel lost main propulsion. Bridge equipment also lost power, and the voyage data recorder lost system feeds. Bridge audio continued to be recorded. The crew was able to briefly restore power to the vessel, but another blackout occurred when a different breaker tripped. At this point, the ship was about 0.2 miles from the Key Bridge. The crew regained electrical power right before the Dolly struck Pier 17, but they were unable to restore propulsion. The ship had an emergency generator, which automatically started following the first blackout on the 26th. However, the generator only powers systems like emergency lighting, navigation, radio equipment, alarms, and a steering pump that allowed for low-speed, limited rudder movements. It does not power propulsion, and without the propeller turning, the rudder was less effective. They were essentially drifting. We're still investigating the exact time the emergency generator started.
National Transportation Safety Board Chair Jennifer Homendy at today's House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee hearing on the Key Bridge collapse. Also at the witness table, a Coast Guard Vice Admiral, Army Corps of Engineers Major General, and the head of the Federal Highway Administration, who estimated that rebuilding the bridge will cost $1.7 billion to $1.9 billion and could be completed by 2028. President Biden has promised the federal government will pay for all of the reconstruction costs. Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, asked the administrator about that.
As you already said, the relief fund is $3.7 billion behind. We're $35 trillion this month in debt at the federal level. And I wonder if you think it's fair that the American taxpayer should not only pay to reconstruct the bridge, but then pay tolls after which to use the infrastructure they just paid for in their taxes. Is that because you're going to set a new precedent here, and is that the precedent we're going to set, or is there some plan to recoup the cost of reconstruction of the bridge? And I think according to the figures we've heard today, upwards of $2 billion, a bridge that originally cost $60.3 million. Is there some plan to recoup that and send that back into the disaster relief fund or to the highway fund, which continually needs massive infusions from the general fund just to stay afloat? What's the plan?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Very important questions, and I appreciate your interest. So let me just try to quickly go through that. Where this was a Maryland state facility before, now it's been designated as part of the interstate system. They were free before to collect their tolls and use them for, maybe Port of Baltimore, whatever they were using them for. Now, since this has been federalized as a facility and going forward when the tolls are restored, as part of the interstate system, they will have to use those for Title 23 eligible funding. So whether it's the maintenance of the existing bridge or other Title 23 highway purposes in Maryland. So the American taxpayer will be benefiting from those tolls. In terms of the precedent, if it was a pre-existing toll facility, they are allowed to toll the facility going forward. But again, it would be using Title 23 eligible expenditures on those tolls.
I understand the Title 23 expenditures and understand that they'd be used for surface transportation in Maryland, but you're asking the taxpayers from across the country to pay for it. And if you're from Washington State, likely you're never going to travel across that bridge, but you're sure going to pay for it. And as long as we're setting precedent, I think it would be appropriate at least to consider reimbursing through the tolls the emergency fund or the transportation fund for the entire country before all of the money goes right back to the state.
Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, questioning the Federal Highway Administration Administrator Shaylin Batt at today's Transportation and Infrastructure Committee hearing on the federal response to the Key Bridge collapse. Story from Courthouse News Service. President Biden asked Congress in April to authorize a 100% federal cost-sharing scheme for rebuilding the bridge. Under current law, the government would only cover expenses for replacing the Key Bridge if repair crews start work within 270 days, or roughly 6 months. After that, the rate shifts to around 90%, leaving the government of Maryland responsible for remaining costs. The House today passed a 5-year FAA reauthorization bill. Federal Aviation Administration. The vote was 387 to 26. It passed the Senate last week, 88 to 4. Now goes to the president, who does plan to sign it into law. 6 of the 26 House members who voted no represent Virginia, 5 Democrats and 1 Republican. And they were opposed to a provision in the bill that would add 5 more round-trip flights to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Wall Street today, the Dow up 349, Nasdaq up 231, S&P up 61. CNBC writes that the S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite popped to record highs Wednesday and added to their strong 2024 performances. The major averages were boosted by a lighter than expected U.S. consumer inflation report. The consumer price index rose 0.3% for the month of April, less than the Dow Jones estimate. The gauge increased 3.4% year over year, in line with expectations. AAA says that Memorial Day weekend travel this year, it's Thursday, May 23rd through Monday, May 27th, will be the second busiest on record. Almost 44 million Americans. The top was 2005. The 44 million is 13% of the population traveling 50 miles or more from home. That includes 3.5 million who will fly. And the Transportation Security Administration Administrator David Pekoske testified today before the House Homeland Security Subcommittee overseeing his agency. The chair, Carlos Jimenez, Republican of Florida, asked him about screening technology.
How do we compare with other countries? In other words, leading edge, not companies, but countries around the world. Have you gone around and watched what they're doing, what they're planning to do? If we don't invest more in technology, are we going to fall behind those countries in the ability to protect the American passenger?
Yes, sir. I think we'll fall behind to a degree. I mean, the biggest difference is the United States has 430 airports in its system. No other country has that number of airports. And from my perspective, it's important that this computed tomography and this identity verification technology and the on-person screening technology be in every airport. Because as you know, if you enter an airport, you're in our system overall. So we have a challenge of scale that other countries don't have. There are some countries that are investing heavily in this technology, but there are many others that are not yet there. But we've been working hard to kind of bring the baseline of global aviation security up with these technology advancements.
Well, let's talk about Western Europe, France, Germany, Great Britain in particular, okay? Probably Germany and Great Britain, okay? Are they doing something different than we are? Are they going to use the same technology that we are? They're looking at something else? And also, what is their timetable for implementing these new technologies?
So for some countries, the timetable is much faster than ours because the airports purchase the technology rather than their federal government, their central government. We are all looking at the same technology. We all recognize around the globe that computed tomography is the technology of the present and the future. It's got a great deal of future potential out 20 or 30 years. The key challenge that's in front of all of us right now is an attempt to align standards of technology performance. And we've made a lot of good progress on that, particularly with the European Civil Aviation Conference.
TSA Administrator David Pekoske questioned by Congressman Carlos Jimenez, Republican of Florida, Homeland Security Subcommittee Chair. The subcommittee ranking Democrat is Sri Thanadar of Michigan, who asked the administrator about a new union contract.
I believe the new pay system represents a sea change for TSA and provides it with more stable footing to mature as an agency. I understand that attrition rates have dropped nearly in half since pay raises were announced. What impact does the drop in attrition rates have on TSA's day-to-day operation? And how does it impact the culture of the agency?
Thank you, sir. And you're right. I mean, our attrition rates have dropped by 50%. And we had, in the last month, our lowest attrition rate ever for the overall TSA workforce of 7.8%. We were up in the 20s for a period of time. So it's a sea change with respect to attrition. We're also seeing a very significant change when we open up jobs for competition. We see far more people applying for those jobs than occurred in the last 5 years. So lower attrition, more applicants for open positions. And then, as I mentioned in the opening statement, we have this survey that every federal agency fills out every year. It's the same year over year, so it's very easy to make very good comparisons. Highest FEV scores ever in our history were this past year.
TSA Administrator David Pekoske at today's hearing on his agency's fiscal year 2025 proposed budget, questioned by Congressman Sri Thanadar, Democrat from Michigan. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, the Biden administration has told key lawmakers it plans to move forward on a new $1 billion sale of arms and ammunition to Israel, 3 congressional aides say. It's the first arms shipment to Israel to be pushed ahead since the administration put another arms transfer consisting of 3,500 bombs of up to 2,000 pounds each on hold this month. The Biden administration, citing concern for civilian casualties in Gaza, has said it paused that bomb transfer to keep Israel from using those particular munitions in its offensive in the crowded southern city of Rafah. Republican lawmakers have seized on the administration's pause on the bomb transfers, saying any lessening of U.S. support for Israel, its closest ally in the Middle East, weakens that country as it fights Hamas and other Iran-backed groups. In the House, they are planning to advance a bill this week to mandate the delivery of offensive weaponry for Israel. That was from Associated Press. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre answered a reporter's question about the sale and the timing.
Does the president
worry that he muddies the message he's trying to send to Israel by approving this new transfer of weapons so soon after he withheld the transfer of these 1,000 and 2,000 pound bombs?
So I don't think, no, to answer your question very directly, I think what Jake Sullivan did here on Monday, laying out the 10 parts of our commitment and how we're seeing the Middle East, obviously, in particular, the war in Israel and Gaza, and how we're moving forward, in supporting our friend, Israel. We've been very clear that when it comes to their security, that continues to be ironclad. There is no change there. We believe that they need to be able to defend themselves, just like the president was able to do when Iran, he was able to bring together a coalition. We saw 300 missiles and drones that were targeted at Israel, that we were able to step in and help, obviously, Israel defend itself. I think that shows how committed we are to their security. And we have said that it is one pause on these bombs, one package, one shipment, and that is obviously connected to Rafah and the potential, what could happen in Rafah, and we've been very clear about that. Those conversations continue. You heard Jake Sullivan say himself in the upcoming days, he's hoping to have a in-person, continuing that engagement that they've been having. There's been 2 virtual, but every day they're having these conversations with their counterparts. I'm talking about NSC and Jake, obviously, and his team. And so we don't think that it muddies the waters. We've been very clear. Our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad, but when it comes to Rafah, where there is a densely populated citizens who are there, who are seeking refuge, more than 1 million, you heard that from Jake, you've heard that from us, you've heard that from the president, we want to make sure that there's a plan to protect their lives.
Did the decision to approve this weapons shipment now have anything to do with the bill that Republicans have introduced that would force the president to approve all military aid to Israel?
Here's what I would say. I think, again, our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. That hasn't changed. We've been very clear about making sure that Israel's able to defend themselves against Iran, against their proxies. We've been very clear. Hezbollah attacks Israel almost every day, right? That's what we're seeing. And we have been very clear about making sure that they're able to defend themselves. And I can't speak to the process, the timing of this particular weapons transfer. That is something for the State Department to speak to, so I would have to leave it to them.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference in the White House briefing room. And the U.S. House did take another step towards bringing up that bill to require offensive weapons be sent to Israel. Congressman Nick Langworthy, Republican from New York, spoke on the House floor during debate on a resolution that would govern the rules for debate on the underlying bill when it comes up later this week.
It is frankly shocking and disgusting to hear that President Biden is purposely withholding our nation's arms shipments to Israel as they're fighting to defend their right to exist. At a time when Israel is under assault, facing attacks from Hamas in Iran, the decision to withhold these critical munitions is not just a failure. It's a betrayal of our greatest ally in the Middle East, and it goes directly against the will of this Congress and the will of the people. We cannot let political games endanger lives. H.R. 8369 would ensure that America stands with Israel in its darkest hour, despite this administration's disgraceful actions to block such vital support. The legislation will ensure that any defense articles and defense services for Israel are delivered expeditiously, without obstruction from this administration that is willing to play games, unfortunately, with such necessary shipments. And we will prevent them subverting the will of Congress. Mr. Speaker, America must stand with Israel and send a message to the world that we will not falter.
Congressman Nick Langworthy, Republican from New York, on the House floor. Again, this was debate on the rules for debate on that bill, which is expected to come up on Thursday for more debate and a final vote. A video posted by Al Jazeera, and they write, sirens sounded for 76 seconds in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank to mark the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, or catastrophe, the displacement of Palestinians by the State of Israel, which continues today, as reported by Al Jazeera. From ABC News, the United States will provide an additional $2 billion in aid to Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Wednesday during a press conference in Kyiv with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. The foreign military financing will be used not only for purchasing weapons from the U.S., but also by Ukraine as it invests in manufacturing in its own machinery and weapons, Blinken said. Ukraine will also use some of the funding to purchase weapons from other countries. The deal for the latest aid comes as Russian forces increase their assaults along the front lines in northern and eastern Ukraine. That was ABC News reporting. Here's Secretary Blinken in Ukraine.
We will provide an additional $2 billion in foreign military financing for Ukraine. And we put this together in a first-of-its-kind defense enterprise fund. And it has three components. One is to provide weapons today, so this will assist Ukraine in acquiring those weapons. Two is to focus as well on something that Dmytro just talked about, investing in Ukraine's defense industrial base, helping to strengthen even more its capacity to produce what it needs for itself, but also to produce for others. And finally, using this fund to help Ukraine purchase military equipment from other countries, not just the United States, for Ukraine's use. All of this, and particularly as we're thinking about the defense industrial base, builds on an incredible spirit of innovation, of ingenuity, of entrepreneurship that we see here in Ukraine, and that I again had a chance to witness for myself. I saw it at the Breville facility, which is doing extraordinary work, innovative work with entrepreneurial vision. I saw it in the extraordinary work as well at the company producing world-leading prosthetics. And we saw it in the way that Ukraine has adapted to deal with the Russian onslaught against its agricultural enterprise, but the work that it's done to find ways around that and to continue to be a leading exporter of food and a breadbasket for the world. Of course, everyone's eyes are focused on the situation in the east and the northeast, in Kharkiv in particular. And so the newest support that I just announced, but particularly the $60 billion supplemental, we know is coming at a critical time. Ukraine is facing this renewed brutal Russian onslaught, and we see, again, senseless strikes at civilians, residential buildings.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Kyiv, Ukraine, a joint news conference with the Ukrainian foreign minister. USA Today writes that Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico was shot and wounded in an apparent assassination attempt Wednesday as he made an appearance outside a community center, local media reported. His official Facebook page said he was shot multiple times and is currently in a life-threatening condition. President Biden putting out a statement, "I am alarmed to hear reports of an attack on Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico. Jill and I are praying for a swift recovery, and our thoughts are with his family and the people of Slovakia. We condemn the horrific act of violence. Our embassy is in close touch with the government of Slovakia and ready to assist." And finally, a bill that would allow the transfer of the site of the old Robert F. Kennedy Stadium in Washington, D.C. from the federal government to the D.C. government so that D.C. can bid for a possible new stadium for the NFL team Washington Commanders. That bill has passed the U.S. House, but may have some trouble in the Senate. Senator Steve Daines, Republican from Montana, said during a subcommittee meeting about this bill today that he will block it unless the Commanders honor the team's old logo depicting a Native American, which was designed in the early 1970s by Walter Blackie Wetzel, a member of the Blackfeet Nation in Montana.
I'm not calling for the return of the former team name, which has become increasingly controversial, especially in Indian country. But the logo itself remains a point of pride for many in Indian country, and specifically for the Wetzel family. I was able to speak last night with Ryan Wetzel, who is the grandson of Blackie Wetzel, who was out, in fact, in his backyard last night doing some remodeling work on a patio just outside of Hamilton, Montana. The failure to properly honor the pride and the history embodied by this iconic logo must be made right by both the team's new ownership and the NFL. Doing so would honor the Blackfeet tribe, my constituents in Montana.
Senator Steve Daines, Republican from Montana, at today's Energy and Natural Resources Subcommittee meeting that included consideration of that bill to transfer the Robert F. Kennedy Stadium site from the federal government to Washington, D.C. Steve Daines said that properly honor could mean, he gave some suggestions, bringing back the old logo with a new team name, or allowing retro merchandise with the logo to be sold on the NFL website. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter word for word, and you'll get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.